Welcome everybody to DNS Unfiltered. First, I have a little bit of housekeeping. We've been in a bit of flux with this podcast, not sure what to do, but we have a clear direction now. We have a bi-weekly post schedule, and we have some great content lined up for you guys, starting with Nathan from Rewst. DNS Filter and Rewst have recently had a integration, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but mostly about automation for MSPs. So Nathan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi. So Nathan Svec. I'm the VP of Strategic Partnerships at Rewst. I've been in the MSP space now for about almost 10 years, so getting a little older. But it's been fun. Been a transition. I worked at an MSP for a while, and then I was able to move over to the vendor side. So I was at WebRoots, then Carbonite, then OpenText throughout those acquisitions. Then I moved over to a company called Blackpoint Cyber. I was there for a little bit, and then came over to Rewst. Been here pretty much since the beginning. I was one of the first 5 employees, so I've been able to work at the company through all of it, which has been a lot of fun. It's been a rocket ship, so it's been fun to be part of.
Awesome. So you were here at the Rewst at the ground level, and I actually did a little research to see your background and everything, and you've kind of been in the cybersecurity space. And Rewst, not necessarily cybersecurity, but definitely connects all those tools together. What do you think was your, I don't know, motivation to move to something like Rewst as opposed to some other cyber company?
Yeah, when I was at Blackpoint and even WebRoot, there was a lot of talk about the SOAR platforms, and there was a lot of automation starting to be added to a lot of those EDR AV products, and that's great. That's a cool space, but that really started getting my mind working and trying to understand. Well, in the MSP space, there's so much more that can be done, and then you kind of look at automation, and what MSPs initially thought of automation was your RMM. So you had your RMM, right? And you would run scripts, and that was the first kind of step in automation. So what we saw there was people running scripts, and that was task automation. What when Aaron, our CEO, when he was launching the company, he wanted to do more security focused things. But when he listened to our advisor board, which was a bunch of MSPs, they said, "Hey, that's cool. But what would be really cool is if you can help us automate client user onboarding and offboarding and ticket triage and all these things that aren't as marketing sexy, but to MSPs, right? They
Sexy is
save
the
a
word
ton
there.
of time. Yeah.
Very cool. So you so let's talk about Rewst for a second. So this RPA, robotic process automation, is kind of a fancy term for automation, and I come from the DevOps world. So my first job at DNS Filter was a DevOps engineer. So my entire job was basically to automate myself out of one. So I feel like Rewst is kind of the missing piece for MSP. So can you just describe the platform a little bit?
Yeah, so Rewst is, like we said, an RPA. What that means is just it's a platform that we give to the MSP, where Rewst builds and maintains all of the integrations. So when you look at other automation tools, you have to go build script. Then you're going to have to build those. You're going to have to connect all those API endpoints of the different products you're trying to connect to, and you the MSP or the MSP technician, have to manage all of those integrations yourself. The benefit of using a product like Rewst is Rewst builds and maintains those integrations, like what we're able to do with DNS Filter. We looked at the DNS Filter API. We built an integration around the authentication mechanism of DNS Filter, and then we build a dropdown in Rewst for every API endpoint that DNS Filter allows. So instead of just looking at DNS Filter and trying to identify the things Rewst thinks would be beneficial for us to build an integration with, we build everything, giving the MSP the ability to do, for instance, DNS filter billing reconciliation, just being able to take data from DNS filter, dump that into the PSA so that the MSPs can make sure that they're billing the correct amounts.
Wow. So I've read the DNS filter and Rewst kind of like a press release, marketing press release.
Yeah.
And it kind of highlighted some of the use cases, but I didn't realize that you actually have access to all of our API endpoints, which is essentially all of them, because DNS filter was built on the API. Like everything you see is done through our API, and we just give that to you. So is that what happens in Rewst? Do you have access to all of those endpoints pretty much?
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the biggest things. So I know, Mike, I've been working with your team now for a little bit, and one of the big pushes that I have from like my role is to go build and find partnerships that I can find with vendors who have that open ecosystem, right? A lot of the vendors in our space have constrained what you can do with the API endpoints, right? And they're kind of restricting it only to their products and things like that. And what an open API allows MSPs to do is be able to use your product, but build their processes around your product. Instead of following your processes, they get to build their own processes, maintain those processes themselves, and be able to take our products, like all the vendors in the space, and be able to put them in puzzle blocks in their stack so that they can run the processes the way that they want to.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm so happy about this Rewst integration for DNS filters, because we can't, like, it would be impossible for us to integrate with everything that exists and in a way that every MSP desires. So having Rewst already integrated with most things that MSPs are using really shortcuts that automation step for us. Like, I'm very excited. Like, I used to be on the product team at DNS Filter, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to integrate with. What do we do? We actually integrated with Zapier, was one of our first integrations because it has a large footprint. But that's, not nearly as flexible or powerful as a platform like Rewst.
Well, and even with the Zapier integration, right? That's great, and it allows MSPs to then connect all the different tools, but they have to build those automations. And so something else that we're working with DNS Filter on is identifying with some DNS Filter Rewst customers, identifying some use cases where Rewst can automate things for MSPs that they normally would have to do manually. So if that's setting up a new customer in DNS Filter, pulling some of that billing data, making sure an agent's set up on an endpoint. If an agent isn't responding, maybe using the RMM to restart that agent, things like that, where it's just those simple steps that a level one tech would have to do. Those are the remedial, repetitive tasks that those guys really don't like doing. And again, if you can automate those little things, that gives them the ability to work on more complicated, harder things because Skynet doesn't exist yet. And so we haven't built a machine to replace all of us. And so there's still jobs out there to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's you're writing music to my ears right now. The automation love, but I do have a few questions. I really want to talk to you, Nathan, about the MSPs and automation. Like, what are some of the most impactful areas that an MSP's operations can benefit from implementing tools like Rewst?
Yeah, so some of the big kind of takeaways that we've seen from our partner base is, the client new user onboarding and offboarding. So when an MSP's customer decides they're going to hire a new employee, a lot of times that comes with a ticket for the MSP, and that ticket can create anywhere between 45 minutes to 2.5 hours worth of work for a technician. And that's just them hopping between different portals, going to the distributor, purchasing the license, going to Microsoft 365, to the MSP's CSP tenant, and then diving into the organization tenant, creating that user, logging into the AD server in the local environment, right? Creating the local user, all of those steps. When in reality, all of those pieces have API endpoints, and you can actually automate 90 to 100% of that process, which then that user can be onboarded faster. But then the reverse is true. You can also offboard users faster. So if you're going to offboard somebody, you can actually schedule that offboarding for, say, Friday, 5 o'clock. Instead of an MSP technician having to stay after hours, or something happens and somebody has to do something late at night, MSP's customer can just fill out a form, and then that can actually offboard the customer's user for the MSP.
When you're talking about like a workflow like that, onboarding and offboarding, what is the typical like trigger step that you see? Like maybe setting up the email inbox or something that kind of kicks off all the automations. What do you see as kind of the first thing that happens?
So for most of our customers it's going to be kicked off through a PSA ticket. And so the email will come into the ticket, and then Rewst could respond to that ticket with a form link, and then the form could be filled out. Also, if the MSP wants more of that white glove approach and they want their technicians to kind of do that, distribution managers, right? Like the people who aren't as technical at the MSP, they could just fill out the form based on the information that came in from the ticket, and they could kick off that automation for the customer, or you could give the customer the ability to just fill that form out, and then they could kick the form off themselves. Then you can also put approvals in place. So it's not just, one person firing somebody. There can be that person's manager that's approving it, or the MSP has to approve the automation before it runs.
I love that. It made me immediately think of basically you have a salesperson could say,
Yep,
hey, customer wants to pay us. And they click the button to that they paid, or some credit card thing happens, or whatever it is, bank transfer, etc. And that kicks off the automation that saves your technicians hours of time. So,
exactly.
hey, MSP technicians, if you want to make the sales guys not have to do more work, but do your work for you, set up automation.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So some of our partners actually use the CRM. So if an MSP salesperson goes off and closes a new deal and they move that deal to closed one in the CRM, Rewst can go through and create that new tenant, say in DNS filter, in the RMM, in the PSA, send the request link from the Microsoft CSP to the tenant so that they could take over that tenant. There's all those steps that the technicians don't have to do anymore, that the salesperson, just by clicking that closed one button, will then they kick off those automations.
So this glorious future is here. Like, you can do this today. So what do you think? Why do you think MSPs are hesitant to start implementing these tools?
Some of the time it comes down to resources, and then just people being nervous about it, right? Like people are nervous that, like you said in the beginning, your job was to automate yourself out of a job. And so I think some people view it as, well, if I automate these things, what am I going to do? And I think as an owner, right, an owner is looking at that as, oh, wait, if these guys are automating these things, that means I can go sell more. And the MSP doesn't necessarily have to hire that many more people, because they can hire less, automate more, and then their guys can actually do that more difficult work, right? Those deployments, those bigger jobs that require actual, coding and stuff like that, to run scripts on the endpoints, building out servers and deploying new software and those things.
What do you think they should start with? Like something that's kind of easy to automate. What do you recommend typically?
So we in our onboarding process will typically work with an MSP and get their client new user onboarding and offboarding workflows set up for them within that first 30 days.
I love that's the best one to start with, because it means you got paid.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
It's
And
like,
it just shows that value right away.
exactly, like money in, automation.
Yes.
Love that. What do you think some of the mistakes are that MSPs are making? Like, you're so recommending the onboarding and offboarding, or, onboarding maybe first, then offboarding. What do you think their common missteps are?
Automating processes that don't exist yet. And I think that
Hmm.
that's a pain point for a lot of MSPs, because, like MSPs like me, right? You're going all the time, right? And sometimes MSPs necessarily don't have processes written for some of the highest value tickets that they have in their PSA, because, their technicians just know how to do those things, so they just do them. And so if there isn't really documentation around those processes, it's really hard to build an automation, because then you can't, that documentation allows you to follow that blueprint. Okay, so this is step one, so we automate step one, step two, right? And you don't miss anything. If you're trying to just build an automation because you see a problem and you don't have that problem documented already, then it's really difficult to build an automation. It's the same thing like building a software, right? You have to take and you have to build out that framework of what you want the software to be, and then you have to build a plan to get there. And it's the same thing with automation.
Exactly. And I'll tell you a little personal story from DNS Filter. I was the lone DevOps engineer for a while, and I'm, not an expert for sure, but
Yeah,
eventually we hired somebody who was a Docker expert. His name is Rafael Gomez. We call him Gomex, and he's awesome. He's freaking awesome. Look him up on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. So he comes in, and I was like, Gomex, what do you do first? Because what I typically do when I'm writing, like, and trying to automate something, I would have started with the automation first, like in Ansible, basically writing an Ansible playbook to update a set of servers. Hundreds of servers around the globe, or updating some software. And he said, no, you should probably like do it manually first, and then automate your manual steps, which is same as documenting it first. And I was like, that
absolutely.
sounds like too much. Like, do I need to do that stuff? And anyway, so we had a little test and I lost really bad. So I agree with you, because Gomex set me straight.
Yeah. It's just those little things, right? Because I think, and then you lose value of the product because if you're taking too long to try and troubleshoot all of those steps that you haven't manually done, right? You're then dumping a ton of time into that product, and then you look at it and you're like, whoa, we haven't gotten anything out of this, and I've spent so many man hours building this stuff. And when you have that documentation, it really allows you to automate those processes even faster because you know what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. And about accomplishments, what do you think an MSP should measure to recognize success?
I so at Rewst, when we automate a process, Rewst, kicks off an automation. We do something. What we'll do is we'll go back into the ticket. We'll add notes for every action Rewst completed in that automation, and then the MSP actually tells Rewst how much time that process would take them to automate. So then we can actually add a time entry to the PSA. So then in the PSA, you can just run a report and see how many hours Rewst has saved you over the course of the time.
So Roost will basically fill out your KPI report, is what you're saying.
In a way, a little bit of it.
It'll tell you the time savings. And that's so you're saying like tie the success metric, essentially a key performance indicator, to time saved or hopefully eventually revenue
Yes.
earned, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, how do you think so I looked at the Flow conference that you guys held in June. I looked at some of
Yep.
those talks. They're really good. Roost has a vendor neutral conference in Tampa. We're probably going to do it again next year, probably around June, I assume.
Yeah, I don't know if marketing will let me say the date yet, but you should
Look,
definitely keep a
don't get in
watch on
trouble. Don't
LinkedIn.
get in trouble, Nathan. So Flow is really good. Some of the videos are on YouTube. Definitely check them out. But Aaron, he's the CEO, right? Founder.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So Aaron's keynote, he was talking about the levels of automation maturity, 0 through 3.
Yeah.
0 is like, we think our RMM is automation, which I loved. And
Yep.
3 is we are automating stuff for our clients and we have metrics on that and all that stuff. So what do you think the success, let's see, how does the automation enhance the client experience?
So one of the things that I talk a lot of conferences, and one of the things that I like to point out is the customer experience. When that customer is interacting with you, is really set in their onboarding. And if someone set up something wrong, a step was skipped, a software wasn't set up correctly, a policy wasn't set up on the DNS filter agent, right? Like all of those things, those automatically set up bad expectations for that customer because you just failed, right? And so as an MSP, the more of those interactions that you can automate, so the same thing happens every single time for those customers, they're going to expect that. And when they get that expected result, it's a lot easier for them to be excited by that result because it's consistently happening.
Yes. And how do you, so you've got this consistent, like, robotic RPA process automation happening. When do you feel it's appropriate to inject some humanity into those steps?
Absolutely. And those are, the more advanced tickets, right? If someone has a problem that they need troubleshooting help with, or they need guidance in, trying to figure something out, right? That's where the MSPs can really shine because that's where that technician can really show their experience. And if they have more time to be able to do those things, when Rewst removes the resetting MFA codes, restarting print spoolers, like all of those small little things that take a lot of the MSP's technician time, if they're more available to be able to be on the phone, to be able to respond to emails more, concisely, without using robotic AI language, the customer then sees that human interaction versus those small pieces. They're not really going to notice that it's automation because they're just looking for something to get fixed right away versus, oh, hey, I lost my budget file that was on my desktop. I deleted it. And so then the MSP has the opportunity to work with them to go back through, pull it up in OneDrive, recovery, or like any of those steps, right? The MSP can interact with the customer because they have the time, because all of those those repetitive tasks, those remedial things have all been taken care of by automation.
Yeah, and that's the like scare, I guess you could call it, of taking our jobs. Like automation took our jobs, or even AI took our jobs. But a lot of people don't understand is the automation will actually free you up to
Yeah,
have a slightly different job where you, the human, can do things that humans are best at, which is talking to other humans, mostly kind of
yeah,
like we're doing here. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
so I love that this automation can free you up to deliver a customer experience because it's automated, a higher level experience.
Absolutely. Yep.
What do you think the right balance is between automation and like human interaction? Is it just like automate as much as possible and see what free time you can fill with that customer interaction?
I think when you look at your PSA and you look at like your top 10 tickets and you look at the amount of time your technicians are spending on those things like password resets, right, and those other things, I think in those instances where you can automate those things, and some of your customers might need more handholding, right? So, my father doesn't really like computers, right? So for him, any of those things, he has to call me and he has to have me walk him through those steps, right? Everybody's got that person in their life, and some MSP customers, right? You have that person. They're going to need more handholding. But on the other side, you have customers that are just they're moving fast. They want things done quickly, and that's where you can lean towards automation because you can get those things done in a quicker time frame for those customers through automation because it doesn't take a technician time. Then that gives the technicians the ability to schedule on sites with even that fast customer who might need to talk about, hey, my computers are running slow, we need to get new computers, and be able to set up that new package for them to get new computers, right? There's those upsell opportunities that are put in place because again you have more time to be able to be human with the other humans.
Love that. And everyone listening to this probably has more than one of those people in their life. Hi there, nerds. What do you say? We're talking. We kind of got onto AI, and automation is already kind of a future-looking aspect of the IT world. What do you think are? What do you think we're going to see next in like the next few years? You don't have to spoil any secrets for Rewst specifically, but just general trends, or if you want to break some news, go for it.
I don't have any news to break, unfortunately. Our CEO does a really good job of doing that. So he likes to break the news. I I think everyone I think everyone is talking about it in the space, right? I don't know of a vendor who doesn't have some type of AI marketing right now, right? Everyone's talking about it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it impacts things in a real tangible way, right? Versus responding to emails and analyzing documents and stuff like that, right? We all use ChatGPT or Copilot to do some of those things. And yeah, they save time, but are they really making that big of a difference right now? And so what I'm really looking at is I'm trying to figure out what real difference AI is going to make in a real software driven response, right?
Yeah, I did notice that Roost has an open AI integration,
Yeah.
um, and I've used that a little bit too, and it's really good for kind of adding a little bit of fake humanity into processes. So like maybe you want to send your team a Slack message or a Teams message when some automation runs successfully, or and have it check. Did these steps happen? Does an email account exist? Does this user have access to this platform? And there are some wins that AI can kind of integrate into those workflows. But
Yep.
yeah, I agree that it's a little farther away for it to be autonomously doing stuff on its own.
Yeah. So through our OpenAI integration, what we're doing is we're looking at a ticket when it comes in, and then we parse out the ticket data. So like the actual subject of the ticket, the words, and then we pass that through OpenAI for it to set the type, subtype, and item of that ticket. And then depending on the length of the ticket, because I've got somebody on my team who sends extremely long emails, that Copilot summarization is really helpful for. And that's the same thing, right, that we use the OpenAI for. It's just a quick note of the summary of the ticket, right? If it's 12 paragraphs long, but the summary could be 2 sentences, that can help a technician just be able to look at it quick, understand what needs to happen, and then go from there. And also the ticket being set with the type, subtype, and item, you can actually then have Rewst kick off automations based on different types and subtypes. So if the ticket comes in and it's a printer issue and it's classified as a printer issue, Rewst can automatically kick off and go through your RMM and do your printer troubleshooting steps in the RMM, and then update the ticket with those results. So then a technician again can look at it and say, okay, I need to call this person because something else isn't working.
That's really powerful because I imagine you could give OpenAI's ChatGPT like a pick list essentially. Like summarize this, and does it land in one of these 5 types? And then based on the type, do X with it. Because AI is really good at taking unstructured data and kind of formatting it into something structured that then your other computers, like your non-AI computers, can then understand and do stuff with.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you think MSPs that are looking to do for automation, like what kind of advice would you have for them to get a kickstart on that?
Looking at your PSA again, I just go back to that because that's for most MSPs, that's going to be the source of truth, to be able to look at what tickets you're spending the most amount of time on, what processes you have around those tickets, and then kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, this ticket touches these 6 applications. This is the process we have around it. How much of this can I automate? How long is it going to take me to automate? So say that ticket happens 5 times a week and it takes you an hour every time it happens. Well, that means realistically in a month you can spend 20 hours on building that automation, because if you spend 20 hours in a month building that automation, you paid for it the next month, and then the next month is just more time savings. So and that's the nice thing about automation, is it's just that compounding time savings. Once you have that process set up, it's just repetitive and it just takes that off your plate.
Yeah, the initial time spent saves the time in the future. But it's
Exactly.
hard, like you said in the beginning, like resource constraints may not give you that 20 hours, but it sounds like you really need to find time for that 20 hours or whatever it happens to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to tell the audience, Nathan, while I've got you here?
No, just would love to connect with anybody who's interested in Rewst. You can ping me on LinkedIn, and also really excited to announce the DNS filter integration and some of the use cases that we're looking at building. I think there's some pretty cool automations that we have that are going to be pretty exciting for the community.
Absolutely. Automate everything.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining me, Nathan, and we'll see you around LinkedIn.
Thank you for your time.